Thank you, everyone. My name's Dawn Butler. I'm the Member of Parliament for Brent East. Thank you very much for joining us today. I think there's people that wanted to come in. Thank you very much for joining us today. We've got a wonderful panel. Everybody's going to get a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the Q&A. The title of this panel is Decolonising Institutions and NGOs, Confronting Historical Realities to Support Restoration. I'm going to go over straight away to Joseph Harker to introduce yourself and your contributions, please.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Dawn, and thanks very much to the APPG Reparations Committee for inviting me along today and organising the event and the panel. It's great to be involved. I'm a journalist of The Guardian. I've been a journalist of The Guardian for about 30 years. But most importantly to today's discussion, 5 years ago, The Guardian learned that it had been founded off the profits of the cotton business, which effectively meant the profits of slavery. And so The Guardian then wanted to look into its background and wanted to come up with a way to atone for this, to respond to this, and they asked me to come up with a plan of doing so. And one of the first things I felt was that whatever we did had to be significant, meaningful, and long-lasting. So first of all, we gave an apology for our Guardian founders' participation and profiteering from the crimes against humanity that were the transatlantic slave trade. We produced a journalism project called Cotton Capital, which some of you may know about, but it was a complete look into what we'd uncovered, why it mattered, and why it still mattered today. And my part of the project became known as the Legacies of Enslavement program, which is all the different ways that we can make changes and make a difference to do something to repair the damage. So I consulted widely with our people of colour staff, with reparations experts, with other groups and institutions that were also going on this journey, and with some other expert voices, people like David Olusoga, who's a board member of the Scott Trust, which owns The Guardian, was a kind of really valuable ally during this time. So the first thing and the most obvious thing to do was to create new journalist positions. So we came up with, and you'll see from the discussions today why it matters, that there are things which institutions can do and things which we can do as one relatively small institution, putting right what we're doing. But I think the power that we have as The Guardian, as a media organisation, is to be able to tell these stories, to report on these underrepresented and underreported communities around the world. And so that's how we can really expand what we're doing and give it more meaning. And so we created correspondents across the world. In the Caribbean, we have a Caribbean correspondent now. We have a South America correspondent who's covering the 100 million Black Brazilians who most people have never heard of. Brazil has got the second highest Black population in the world, yet you barely ever see a Black Brazilian person ever spoken about. And that's even within Brazil, the Black population is massively underrepresented. So we've created new correspondents across Africa, the United States, the UK. We've created new openings for Black journalists to come through, giving them bursaries and fellowships, both here in the US and in Australia, where we also have offices. We are committed to doing more research and to expanding this work and this knowledge to a wider group than just Guardian journalists. And that's why we're partnering with the Science and Industry Museum in Manchester, so that the people of Manchester, whose city grew off the proceeds of cotton and slavery, know exactly where the money came from. Manchester was a small village before the cotton industry came to town. And also we are working, in a way most important, we're working directly with descendant communities in the southern United States and in Jamaica, where the Guardian founders had direct connections, doing a reparations program and with consulting with them and coming up with a plan for long-term reparations and repair work in those communities. So, and it's a 10-year program. So we're hoping that by the end of that decade, the changes that we made will be embedded and will have a long-lasting impact.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, James, for leading on that in The Guardian, for The Guardian as well. We've done a lot of work. Thank you. Over to Nonhlanhla.
That was good. Hi, everyone. My name is Nonhlanhla Makuyana, and I'm a community economist. I am the co-founder and co-director of Decolonising Economics, and my work is really interested in how racial capitalism created the economic system as we know it today. And that I always start when I talk about this, I was just thinking about how, in colonial archives, African heritage people were, you can't find real names of people. We were labeled as goods to be traded in the same way that, cotton was traded. And I'm always really interested in how do we, as African heritage people who are labeled as commodities, reclaim our sense of being within our current economic system that doesn't facilitate that. And my work is interested in self-determination. And that is the ability for us to have agency and choices over how we participate within the economy and how we create our own economic realities that are independent and of the capitalist economic systems interruptions into our histories and our futures. And a lot of this work for me has looked like, firstly, researching and archiving what is African heritage economic thought and practice. And, looking at how have we used our collective resources or how our relationships and our ideas of governance look differently within the economic system. And this is also then centered around, how do we make these practices and tools as accessible and as present in our lives? Because, capitalism is really serious and it sort of pushes us to participate in ways that make us forget that we have different choices. And so in my work, this has looked like a lot of different things. So at Decolonising Economics, my work has been how do we contextualize the economy through political education? Because lots of people don't know that slavery, the trade of African people created lots of institutions that we still use today, like banks, insurance, and also within that of working within the new economics movement, lots of institutions are still sort of embedded or they function from a place of forgetting that this is the foundation of racial capitalism. So within that political education work, we work with organizations to think about how their strategies should actually facilitate the remembering of this and how those structures have created the foundations of what the economy is. And then secondly, this looks like, so at the moment, I'm working to build a Black British archive of oral and economic history. And this has kind of looked at going across the country and meeting lots of communities who are doing really amazing work of meeting communities' needs, like setting up community-led housing or, setting up collective banks. And for example, we did this amazing event with a Somali women's co-op called Coffee Afrique, who use saving circles like Partner and Susu, and in a greater and bigger scale of creating autonomy for African women to collectively resource through their friendships and their relationships without relying on banks or institutions that actually aren't designed for people like us. And this work is really great because it reminds us that there's lots of technologies and within our ancestries and within our lineage of how we can reshape our economy and sort of self-determine what it means to participate within our economies as African heritage people.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So we're going to come back with a Q&A around the racial capitalism. We will come back to that. Wonderful. Next, we're going to have John Dower. John, over to you.
Use that mic.
Oh, is that one not working?
Hello, is it working? Yeah. Hello, yes, my name is John Dower. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks for being the chair of this, and thanks for the invitation to this amazing conference. It's my third year coming here. Just heard two really positive stories, and at risk of formal grounding what I'm going to say, mine might not start off being so positive. Indeed, I'm not really used to being the most popular person in the room. I'll tell you why. So my name is John Darragh. I'm part of the Trevelyan family. I'm essentially descended from the perpetrators of colonialism and enslavement, because my ancestors, the Trevelyan family, owned plantations in Grenada, and at abolition were compensated. Now, I didn't know about any of this until 2016. And I read an article by David Onshoga, who's been referred to already, great historian, and it said, if you think you're descended from landed gentry, upper class, middle upper class, whatever, we have a complicated class system in Britain, but basically, if you think you had some posh ancestors, you should go to this Legacies of Slavery database, which I did. And looking back at that moment when I entered Trevelyan into that database, was, without being over dramatic, it was the moment that changed my life, because suddenly I realised that before that I thought that we were affiliated to the good guys. That my great grandfather was a Labour MP, then the first Labour government, Minister for Education. I thought we were affiliated to the good guys. I thought we were more on the side of the abolitionists. I genuinely accepted the family narrative, which I now see as kind of being about justifying and extolling its moral virtues as a family. And what I realised, I'd been lied to. So suddenly it dawned on me when I typed in Trevelyan and 1,004 enslaved people came up on 6 plantations in Grenada. Suddenly my brain just went. It was a moment of, as I say, sort of change of my life and maybe even my destiny. So that's where I come from. I am descended from perpetrators, and what I then started to do was change the narrative in the family, which I thought was absolutely essential, because I'd always been brought up to think that morality was important, that doing the right thing was important, that treating other people as you wish to be treated yourself. But I'm not a particularly Christian person. I believe that as a central message of the Bible is really important, and I really believe it. And I thought, if I was a person descended from the enslaved, I'd be really angry with our family. So I immediately rang my dad, said, did you not know? He said, no, I didn't know. I said, well, we have to apologise to the people of Grenada. We have to go and do something about this, because this is terrible. So cut to 7 years later, many things happened. I sent lots of angry emails out to members of the family. We convened Zoom meetings. Nothing was really happening. And then, of course, lockdown happened and George Floyd's death happened, and then people started to listen, and they started to go, oh, actually, these are my white Trevelyan family ancestors. Oh, actually, racism is still with us. And I was like, yeah, it is. I mean, I live in Brixton, I know this. And we began to gain traction. And we eventually, after 7 years, found ourselves in Grenada in a Reparations Commission meeting, with my cousin Laura Trevelyan, apologising to the people of Grenada for what we've done. We also set up a family charity called the Trevelyan Education Charity on Grenada, which funds educational projects in Grenada. And then I set up, co-founded Heirs of Slavery, which is a loose affiliation of families of descendants of enslavers. And we have 2 purposes, essentially, Heirs of Slavery. Our main one is to try and encourage, inspire, educate, support other descendants of enslavers to come forward.
Sorry, we will come back. We will come back. We will come back to you.
Okay, I was supposed to say. Okay, so here's the important thing I want to say is that that's just my story, right? That I'm descended from perpetrators of a crime. But the thing is, if you think about our country, this country is in denial of the crimes it committed. This country is based upon being perpetrators of terrible crimes of exploitation, extraction, kidnap, all of the things that it did in the name of the country to make it so-called great. But it has never dealt with it. It's a bit like, if you think about restorative justice, It's like having a perpetrator who will not admit what they did was wrong. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a country and institutions, many institutions and a government, and the king, dare I say, even though we get feeding the kings on our side, who are not getting involved. So I've got loads more to say, but
we will come back to you because this is about reparations. So
yeah.
we will definitely come back to you because obviously your family's playing a huge role in that, leading the way.
So I'll just finish by saying, essentially the problem we have is we have no leadership. So that's why there are all these splintered institutions, organisations, NGOs, and we've been talking about today, and people doing great things, but we're all kind of splintered because there's no leadership. And I think that's what we're really lacking.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I will come to you in a bit. So next we are over to Sheeba. You ready? I'm over to Sheeba.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone.
Greetings.
So I'm here today because I am the offspring of enslaved Africans, and I feel very strongly about what's happened to our people. I feel that the level of awfulness and the methods that were used to season us, to beat our natural heritage out of us, and to attempt to turn us into objects. I feel that the level of intensity that was used for that should also be applied now to reverse it. It cannot be reversed by just talking. The groups and people like myself who feel very strongly about this needs to get together, organize themselves, join other organizations. I am a member of Ethiopian World Federation, have been for over 30 years. I joined that organization because it was dealing with reparations and repatriation. Everyone knows that the Rastafari community have been chanting for this for the longest time. Now that it's become a cause, everyone's jumping on that bandwagon. But we need genuine people to get on board and to deal with it with the intensity that was applied when they tried to turn us into objects. When one reads and does research and see the actual things that were done to our people, it is just beyond awful. That's the reality. No one wants to deal with it. No one wants to talk about it because it's too horrible, one. And two, because the powers that be do not want to take responsibility and do not want to see things reversed so that the African race is on a level playing field like everyone else. We have the resources, we have the wise mind, we have the strength, we're hard workers, hence why we were exploited for over these 4 or 5 centuries. So knowing that we have all of this, no one is prepared to actually deal with the wrong that was done and try to give us some balance so that we can deal with life like everyone else. Anyone with a black or brown skin knows the boundaries and the barriers that we deal with on a daily basis, because the mindset that enslaved us still exists. And that mindset is what we have to deal with. Therefore, we should put our NGOs together and form a strength. Even if we can't all come together, we should be thinking like that and working towards that, because that's the only way we're really going to get repatriation on the level that is needed, i.e. institutions, organizations, etc., that have made a fortune out of our people's slave labor. These people need to be honest. They need to accept what they did was wrong and then try to make some kind of retribution. It's not enough just to talk. It's not enough just to say they're sorry. We need to see that they're sorry, because we are still suffering from the throwback of what they did to our generations over centuries. This isn't something that happened over 5-6 years and then everyone was sorry and it was put right. We're talking centuries. This is ingrained in people's mindset, in people's DNA, and the suffering that we've gone through is ingrained in ours. And the fact is, if something isn't done fairly and justly soon, the way everyone feels and the bubbling up of pain that we're feeling will explode in the way that it's going to be allowed to explode if it's not dealt with properly. So I say, let's get together and do it right.
Thank you very much for that. We all know that. Thank you very much for that. So, next we go to have Tatianna Ennin. Tatianna, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you all today. We're discussing a very, very important matter. First, I want to start by reminding us that the legacies of slavery, colonialism, and our current global economic structure, which is based on extraction, didn't end with abolitionist movements or with the independence movements that we saw across the continent of Africa. Instead, what we see today is how these things have insidiously evolved. Irrespective of how much time has passed, colonialism still continues to shape and devastate the African continent. It devastates the African continent specifically through undemocratic governance, economically speaking. We see how this plays out in the realm of aid, trade, tax, and international trade. At Christian Aid, our recent debt report found that in 2023, the UK's aid budget to Africa was £1.2 billion, which is equivalent to $1.5 billion. In that same year, Africa spent near 85 billion servicing its external debt, which is more than 50 times it received in aid from the UK. Now, what I'm not saying is that more aid is the solution to dealing with Africa's economic issues. I'm merely pointing out that what we see here is a continuation of a historical pattern of extraction, a historical pattern that leaves the African continent with fewer resources to invest in its own development. And so if we look at debt and we turn now to the climate crisis, we see yet again how this historical pattern of extraction, of exploitation plays out in the issue of climate change and the climate crisis. We know that the African continent contributes only 4% to global carbon emissions, yet the African continent bears the brunt of climate-related economic loss and damage. The African continent does not have the resources it needs to adapt and mitigate the issues that come with climate change, even though it hasn't contributed to the climate crisis. These realities teach us the truth, that when we speak of reparations, we're not just talking about a financial sum. Yes, we want the money, but when we speak of reparative justice, we're speaking about ending the systems, the economic systems, the political systems, the cultural systems, the spiritual systems, any system that exists to perpetuate these legacies of colonialism, slavery, exploitation, extraction. Reparations isn't merely financial, but it's multi-dimensional. That's something that we must always keep in mind, because we can receive all the money in the world, and the systems that got us to this point will still keep us here. Oh my gosh, I have 1 minute. Wow.
Don't worry, we'll come back to you.
That's fine. Okay. Today, the panel discussions are institutions and decolonising our institutions. And so we only need to look at how the UK government paid the equivalent in today's money of £16.5 billion to compensate slave owners when they lost their livelihoods due to the abolition of slavery, to see how the systems of power that exist today exist to resource harm, benefit perpetrators, and exclude the oppressed from decision-making tables. If we look at the church, an interrogation of church history will teach us that the Church of England, the Church of Scotland, they amassed great amounts of wealth on the beaten backs of enslaved Africans. The institutions that exist today need to reckon not only with their history and how they've been complicit in perpetuating harm against Africans, but also recognizing that they have a responsibility today to exact redress. if we come back to me, hopefully I can speak on how the IMF and the World Bank continue to savage and ravage the African continent and keep us in cycles of dependence and what breaking out from that could look like as a continent. So thank you.
We're definitely going to come back on the IMF issue, so don't scroll past that bit in your notes. We want to come back to that. And I think that's a direct link to the racial capitalism as well. So incredible links there. And a way for us to progress this. So it's not just talking, it's about educating, understanding what we need to do to go forward. Thank you very much. And our last but not least speaker is Charmaine Simpson. Over to you, Charmaine.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings. So my name is Charmaine Simpson. I represent various different hats as well. So being a child of Jamaican heritage, my family has been involved in the enslavement of being enslaved. I also represent the church commissioners, work for them, been working for about 2 years now on their projects to address this area of work, and I'm going to talk about that. And I also represent an organisation called Black History Studies, where we've been teaching history and Black studies for a number of years. And there's a reason why I say this, okay? So I'm representing the Church of England, the church commissioners. Church of England is the church commissioners are basically the funds and the money of the church, okay? And a number of years ago, they decided to do a piece of research that into the church commissioners' links to African chattel enslavement through the Queen's and Bounty. Okay, and they found that through the Queen's and Bounty, they had invested in the South Sea Company and had about £400,000 worth of investments in the slave economy, which is about 724 million today. Okay, so they decided to open up earmark some money, £100 million, to look at that work and repair the damage. Work towards repairing the damage done. It's not reparations, but they're working towards that. Now, church commissioners realised they're not historians, and they brought me in as the research engagement coordinator to actually coordinate the work. As part of this work is telling the stories and telling the truth. We cannot assume that people know the full truth, hence the reason why we need to do the research. Some of the fight we get against this work is that they are saying that church commissioners did not make profit from enslavement, from the investments in this slave economy. Did you hear that? And if we allocate £100 million to the Black community, we're going to squander it. Yeah, my name was highlighted in a newspaper article this week because I challenged somebody in one of the church commissioners' conferences. Now, we need to be brave enough to challenge the misinformation that is out there. We need to be brave enough to actually go and do the research and ask those painful questions when you're working for an organisation that is representative of England, and even Christian people don't want you to do this work. Yeah, and we have to be brave enough to do the research. And it's so important that we tell those stories, because there's a lot of stories to be shared. And the fact that these stories are not being shared, hidden, that also adds to the damage done to us. Okay. Before I came to this session today, I was at Lewisham Young Leaders Academy teaching young people about being Black genius. That is reparations. That is repairing the damage done for young people growing up feeling that they're inferior in this country, that they have no contribution to this country. It's Black History Month. We have contributed so much to this country, but it's not being shared. Okay, so what I'm trying to do with the work I'm doing is reaching out to the community, is to come and work with us to co-design the actual fund. Church of England don't want to do a top-down approach to this fund. They want the community fully to be involved. This is one of the reasons why it's taken a long time to get this fund released, because we are working with the community. I travel all over the UK working with different groups, and that's so important that we work with all groups with this work, because we are, one hand coming together makes the work a bit lighter. And it's so important that we tell the stories, tell the truth, and actually look at how we can repair. Because it's not one way of repairing. There's spiritual warfare we're dealing with as well, physical warfare, on all of the legacy of the history. That's 2014. So all of these things that we have to do, and we're working towards that. And institution must be willing to be open and have an open conversation with people doing this work. It's so important. Because some organisations can be gatekeepers regarding this work, so we need to come together. So that's on this.
Thank you.
And I love the struggle when you saw Gus, the incredible Gus Strong walking. So, you know, that's how we respect our leaders in the community. So the next half an hour that we've got is about solutions. What are we going to do? How we can contribute? How we can work together? It's about putting egos to one side. There's a lot of egos in this era of work, and now it's too serious. So this half an hour is just about solution. What do we need to do? How do we work together? So I want to go back to Tatianna just to talk about actually no, before I do that, Charmaine, you talk about community, everybody working together and what the churches are doing. How do people get in touch? What do they need to do? Is there an email? Is there a number?
Yeah. So I realised that the Church of England has a whole archive. Does anybody know where that is? It's in Waterloo. And I go into these archives and realise that I'm usually the only one in there. So what I've done is I've created a whole event to try and get more representation. So on the 1st of November, we're doing an event looking at the Black history in the Church of England. That's a free event. I want everybody to come out to that as well so we can have more people utilising the archive.
Where is it?
The 1st of November at Lambeth Palace Library. If you email me, charmaine.simpson@churchofengland.org, I'll be here. Just grab me and give you all my details. And that's an event that we're trying to do, is to open up the archives so that people can go there, do their own independent research and tell the stories in their own unique way. Because stories don't have to be told in...
And how do people help with the finances and money and getting that spent and allocated? How do people get...
The fund is not available yet because as a Church of England is a charity. So they have to change their framework of how they're going to distribute their funds. We're going through that process at the moment. So that's going to take some time. But in the meantime, we can do research into our own story. So if anybody has any idea, we can commission people to do certain research as well. So come and speak to me. We can have conversations about that.
Right. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. And on the IMF, Tatianna?
Thank you. So before I get into solutions, I think it's important for me to set the stage and give some context to what it is we're dealing with when it comes to the IMF and the economic justice of reparations. So the African continent is home to 1.4 billion people spread across 55 countries. However, when it comes to the IMF, Africa as a continent only holds 6.47% of voting rights. When we compare this to the US, which hosts a population of 340 million people, they have the largest share of voting rights, of 16.75% of voting rights. So this disparity shows us how the African continent is limited in its ability to influence the economic rules, which unfortunately will determine their destinies when it comes to their ability to develop economically. When we look at the credit rating market and how Africa deals with its credit and its debt, you know, the big three, Moody's, S&P Global, and Fitch Ratings, the big three, these organizations, these companies routinely penalize African economies through their assessments of how Africa services its debts. And the consequences and the implications of that is that, you know, African countries often are pressured to adopt preemptive austerity measures so that their credit ratings are not downgraded. It means that capital and resources are often leaving the country and the continent before they're benefited and experienced by the people on the ground. And it also means that countries in Africa have higher borrowing rates in order to finance their own development. And so we can't talk about decolonizing aid and global financial architecture without addressing these imbalances of power. So what do? I think firstly, we need to recognize that although we're here to discuss policy, we cannot overturn any of this by describing a laundry list of policies. We need to understand that the gatekeepers, we should not look to the gatekeepers to give us permission to define our own agendas. So in February of this year, we worked closely with the AU, the African Union, with the Heads of State Summit. And, we had meetings with various diplomats and representatives from faith institutions and various politicians. And whilst in these meetings, we came up with ideas to develop an African credit rating agency, an African monetary fund, an African Central Development Bank. These are initiatives that we, as organizations, as NGOs, should be supporting civil society to build for themselves. I understand the need for civil society and NGOs like Christian Aid to create platforms where we pass up the mic for them to advocate for their own issues on these high-level tables and in these spaces, but also recognizing that if we want to see change, if we want to see actual solutions, we need to support partners in the global south to develop an advocacy identity which isn't hinged on their proximity to gatekeepers such as us. And so I think the policy decisions and the solutions look like, yes, how do we bring people into the spaces where these decisions are being made? How do we encourage African nations to build their own sovereignty and agency and develop their own institutions? And also when they come into partnership with organizations and NGOs, how are we ensuring that their movements do not live and die with their partnerships with us? Thank you.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Okay, if you want to ask a question, maybe just raise your hand and I will come to you. Solutions and who are you going to work with and how?
Thanks. I think it's a big question what are the solutions, but I think there's different people have different ideas about reparations. I think first of all we need to kind of clarify what do we mean. I think often people talk about money. And it's not about money, as someone said the other day, it's about power. And we don't want to, the minute you start talking about money, you immediately get a barrier built up against the people in power who don't want to give you any. And so we need to be talking about what it means, that it's not about giving cash handouts to people who were even directly enslaved themselves. It's 200 years ago. We have all those kind of arguments that we have to overcome, but just being clear on what reparations is for, it's about reducing systemic inequality and injustice. We need to work on education. We need to get people, our schools, but just our wider communities to understand the impact that slavery had in this country, the profiteering that people made from it, the fact that that people are still making money and still living off the proceeds, and people are still suffering the harms of slavery, even though it was several generations ago. So we need to be able to make that argument. And we also need to recognize there's a lot of people in this space. We've all got we come into this space from different backgrounds. Some people think, oh, you have to be this, or, we've heard about elite capture, which is a valid point that Esther Kozai said earlier. But, we also have to recognize that there's a lot of organizations, institutions, and individuals trying to make progress in this space. There's no rule book for doing it, but we just have to understand that we are working in the common interest and work together where we can. The heirs of slavery group, they are white descendants of enslavers, but they give us access and they give us opportunities to take this discussion to new organizations and institutions, which is invaluable. So we need to recognize the allies wherever they are.
Thank you. Before I come to this end of the table, there's with the glasses. Yep, you want to ask a question? I see you.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm not sure. This is.
They're both, he was just switched off.
Oh.
When it comes, look, this money thing really needs to. We need to kind of get some proper message on it. It's always it's like we don't care about the money. No, we care about the money. Yeah. The money is important. The money what hurts people. That's why we get the resistance. So please. I would like to hear one time from a panel a unified, worked out message on how you deal with saying that reparations is about the money and something. Not all this apologetic about it not being. But my question is this. Can you map out, if it's not going to be a situation where it's complete economic overturn and collapse, then exactly what are just roughly the stages of transition from the current economic order into the economic order that we are aiming for, i.e. anti-capitalist.
All right, thank you. I think we touched on that. I'll come back. There's a lady at the back, Mary, and then I'll come to you.
Greetings. Following on from what the man has just said, and just to say as well that there was a young black sister in the education group who did articulate the need for what I refer to as economic reparative justice. We're talking about rebuilding ourselves and our communities that costs money. So therefore, I'd like the panel to address how can we begin to identify what reparative economic justice looks like. And we're not just talking about, for example, corporate companies giving fellowships and the British government giving discounts on student loans. I'm talking about safe black spaces where we can have our own buildings, where we can develop our own reparative justice workshops without having the need for those that have suddenly jumped on the reparations train. I'm not going to identify anyone, but they don't look like
we're doing solutions, not.
Well, I asked the question. What can reparative economic justice look like?
Thank you.
I gave an example.
Thank you. And this person here at the front, glasses, and then I'm going to come to Nonhlanhla.
Yes, I think the solution is to
It's working.
is go back to a liberation movement, because that's the reparations is a process of liberation. I do agree that the IMF is a part of that solution, but that's international relations. But I'm talking about the grassroots here. We should literally go back to Black is Beautiful movements, things like that. Because if we can't.
Okay, I think Black is beautiful.
Yeah, but I mean,
what do you mean by that?
Well, we abandoned it in the 70s, and we need to go back to that, because we're going back to this anti-black culture within the black community, the colorism. We need to sort our own.
All of us working together.
Yeah, we have to be
political black.
We have to be truthful within ourselves or within our communities.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Nonhlanhla?
Yeah.
I'm going to say that until I get it read.
I like that you keep on adding another stuff. So in my work, there's the type of practice that I'm involved in is around pluralist economics. And pluralist economics is the idea that there are multiple there's many economies within our economy. And because of colonialism, capitalism and the way that the system works comes really at the forefront, but then people sometimes don't recognize that there's so many different types of economic practices that exist within our current economy. So I'm sharing this because I feel like, someone was asking about, well, how do we change the economic system? So there's two parts in it. We divest from the current economic system, which is, I think, what a lot of movements have really been concerned with. But then we also need to build alternative economics, every day. And I think this has looked like, at the moment, this is the need to create our own institutions to take care of our own needs without relying on systems that exist, because they're not built for us, they don't work for us. And I think quite often people keep on returning to this thing, these institutions should be doing this. And they can, but they won't. So how do we actually take the power within our own hands to create these things? And so at the moment, this is coming up a lot as community wealth building. So, and I guess someone mentioned the politics as well, because you can, have housing associations, but if they don't have the politics of liberation, it's just another housing, those ones for building the skyscrapers, the politics behind this is the need to actually self-determine, and I think sometimes what's missing from that is that we as African heritage people, we throw away our own ways of doing stuff. What is modern, or how did we and I think, for example, with money, right? So everyone is let's change the banks, let's change all of these things, but there's credit unions that exist, and credit unions have a really huge history in the UK of changing the material realities for British people. And I work with this really wonderful man called Adote Bing Papo, who set up a credit union in Ghana that has resourced so many cooperatives that is actually not relying on any system, not relying on any white people, not relying on capitalist practices that work. So I really feel I guess just to sort of plug my work, at the moment, I'm creating an oral histories archive, which is actually because I think lots of these tools exist within our communities, but they're not made accessible. They're looked down upon. People are like, oh, why would I trust my fellow person when I could just go to a bank because I trust banks? And I think there's an element of like, how do we undo our own internal biases around our own cultures and the expertise that exists within that. And I think community wealth building is a really good way, but once it's really informed by politics of liberation and not just to get on the same place as like white people.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Talking about white people, anything on?
Yeah, this is really interesting because I had a conversation with a young journalist working at ITN recently. I said to a black journalist, so she's probably in her 20s, and I said, why can we not get this story onto the news? Why can we not get comparative justice talked about? And she said, because it's not a positive story. If you can sell it as a positive story, then we can start talking about it. But given the times we're in, she said, I don't know how you do that. And I think that's really interesting what you're saying, because really what you're saying is, if we try and make this into a movement which is going to appeal to the majority, maybe we're going to fail in the short term. But your thing about inter-community, credit unions, community wealth building, maybe that is a short-term solution to build resilience while we wait for times to get better. I don't know, but I thought it was a wake-up call for me. I was thinking, I don't know how we get this story out into the wider world, which of course is kind of where I want to get it to. I want to talk to the majority of people in this country and get them to engage, but it's really tough.
Yeah. And just because I know you have done a lot of work, who have you been working with so far, and what would you like to do going forward?
Well, it's interesting. I was going through this. I've got this file. I write these files in every meeting I have, and I've got like 30 different organisations that I've had conversations with over the last sort of 9 months, from campaigners in France, like Harker, who we've been working with quite a lot, who are affiliated with the shipping industry from transatlantic trade in France. I mean, we've talked to most campaigning organisations, or many of them, including, I mean, I can start naming them, but you don't need to do that.
And if people get in touch with you, how do they do that?
They go to the Heirs of Slavery website, go onto the contact page, enter the details, and I will answer because I'm the receptionist. It's an organisation, but we want to talk. That's what we want to do. We want, what we do is we aspire to allyship. I'm not saying we've got there yet, but we aspire to it. We want to be allies.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yes, you can clap him. Another round of questions, contributions, Professor Gus John. Of course, Professor Gus John. If you just put your hands up, then I'll recognise you. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Just in relation to your contributions, the last person who spoke, I didn't hear you from the beginning, but it seems to me that one of the things Heirs of Slavery and organizations such as yours should do is to take on the responsibility of challenging and confronting the British state about what it is not doing. For example, given the resources that you have, and given what we know to be the woeful betrayal, not just of Black students, but of white students in the society as well, for God knows the last 100 years or whatever, why isn't the Heirs of Slavery engaged with, for example, the National Curriculum and Assessment Review? Because you ought to be saying to the government and to Becky Francis, who's leading that review, that it is utterly appalling that it does not begin even to address issues of race and education and the role of schooling and education in dismantling all of that notion of white supremacy and stuff, which it doesn't matter how poor and dispossessed they get, white folk continue to hang on to as if we're the problem and not the elites of the society. So it seems to me that we have work to do as Black reparationists, but people like yourselves, especially given where you're connected and situated, ought to be just banging down on the government, on the church, on the monarchy, for Christ's sake, and all of those hopeless people.
Thank you, Professor. You mentioned that in the beginning, but then about the paper, yeah, that's it. And I've got time for another couple. Is anyone else that wanted to? Yeah.
Hi. I just wondered if I'm going to borrow from a word which many of the oppressors are using, especially at this moment in time, which is weaponization. I wonder whether the reparation project can be weaponized in a way that will make it more effective and maybe we can get results quicker. I also wish to make a comparison with that many African countries are still being exploited. You heard Jeremy mention it in the morning, Niger and uranium. But there are so many other African countries, they have resources like cobalt, like diamond, which is still being exploited. So why can't we kind of find a mechanism to link the two things together? So in my view, then the oppressors, the former colonial powers, would take us more seriously.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And person here at the front. Person here at the front, sorry. Oh, was there one person at the back? Yeah, take that. Save you some steps.
Yes, Jose Mora from Mauritius. The theme of this workshop is decolonization. And we all know colonization was a global business. So it follows that decolonization must be global business. And I wonder why we keep talking about Africa, Caribbean, but there are other Black countries in Europe, in Spain, in Brazil. Why is it that this movement, reparation movement, doesn't become global and get all these countries working together and have only, if that's my thought, one reparations commission for the global community instead of separating Africa, Caribbean, etc., etc.
Thank you very much. There are some global organizations. This person here. And then I'll come back to the panel and everyone can have an opportunity to contribute.
Thank you. I'm David Roberts, the founder of the African Caribbean Sustainability and Investment Summit. It's amazing that question just came through because we actually launched the World Reparations Conference at the House of Lords on the 25th of September, at which both Joseph and John appeared. So my question really was to ask if there was a concerted effort to get global players within the reparative or reparative justice space involved in this exercise. But I'm happy to say that we have actually started that work and we'll be working assiduously to ensure that all groups that have been, particularly those historic ones in this space, get involved in what we're doing.
How do people get in touch with you?
On the website, which is africancaribbeansummit.com. But I'm around, so I can give all of my cards and I can share my details as well.
Brilliant.
Online.
Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
They want the yeah. Say who you are as well, everyone. Again.
Thank you. I'm Sabi Dalu, co-convener of Stand Up to Racism, and I'm just helping out in this session today and at this conference. So question from someone online is, we quite rightly engage with many faces of power and influence in our quest to secure reparatory justice. Unfortunately, this is often exploited. Our presence is taken as endorsement and participation for these people to carry on doing what they are what they are doing, which in essence is about us, but without us. How do we get around this?
Thank you. And Sabi, can you just tell people how, I mean, I'm very much into everyone being connected at this conference and knowing who's who. How can people get in touch with Stand Up to Racism and what you're doing?
So I guess the best way is to check out our website, www.standuptoracism.org.uk. You can also follow us on the same name, Stand Up to Racism, on X and on Facebook and on Instagram. And we're really, at the moment, very active in campaigning against the far right, who are active on the streets at the moment. So that's a big focus of our campaigning. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to start with John. There was a question, direct question from Professor Gus. John.
Gus, I wish I was better connected, but I'm less well connected than you think I am, I can assure you. I know two MPs, Clive Lewis and Bel Riviere-Addy, who I've got to know through this. We're a loose collection of people. I don't have any personal links to the curriculum board. You're probably right, I should have pushed harder on that. The way I've been tackling that myself, and as we have been talking to Black Curriculum, as you know, and in fact I appeared in the film with you that Black Curriculum made, and we supported that, the making of that film. I suppose that could be considered not enough, and I'll take that on and I'll take it back to the steering committee and talk about whether we should have done more and we should continue doing more. So I take your point. We are honestly less influential. I think we're viewed by quite a lot of the establishment as kind of troublemakers ourselves, which doesn't really help much, but I suspect that we have less power than you think we have.
You're very suspect if you will not.
But you know what? Being a troublemaker is okay, John. Good trouble, necessary trouble to coach on me. Nonhlanhla, do you want to say?
Yeah,
there was some talk about self-determination, community wealth, liberation movement.
Mm-hmm. So I think I also heard stuff, people talking about power. So I think there's a real need for us as a community to build power through setting up our alternative institutions. And I feel like at the moment there's quite a lot of energy around that. And I think that energy is really informed by intergenerational leadership within our movements. And I think a lot of these practices of building power are especially I would say in England are being lost, because especially as a younger person, lots of people who are doing all the work of self-determination are not connecting to elders in our community. There's a breakdown in learning, and then because of that breakdown in learning, it means that people are just oh my God, I've just come up with this new thing, when actually this thing hasn't fulfilled. And there's people who've failed, there's people who've won, and I think there's this whole practice of listening to our elders in order to actually build a strengthened movement, and we can't build power without that connection.
And you also mentioned earlier Pardner and Susu. Now, when people have tried to modernize that, they've been accused of money laundering. So what's your views around that?
So I always say that people trust banks more than people, and it's funny because banks invest in genocide. Mm-hmm. Banks gamble away your money. Yeah. Banks are really not trustworthy, And I think also sometimes we as Black people, we internalize a lot of that distrust. And I think someone earlier was saying about how, there's this whole idea that Black people will squander money, or there's this whole idea that we don't know what to do with money. And I don't actually think that's true. Sure. There's a lot of WhatsApp scams. And I feel like that is something that definitely does happen. But also within my research of working within how to use saving circles on a bigger scale, there's a question of scale. So I think as Black people, this whole idea that things need to be massive in order to be good. And for things like that, they're actually built on trust. And before, we'd all be living in the same-ish place. So if you took my money, I know where you live, I'm going to come and get that money. And so there's something about, how do we build trust as people when sometimes we're on the internet, or sometimes, we don't actually get to meet face-to-face. And actually, my solution is, I think when we start smaller, it gets better. We can't start big and expect things to go amazing, because also that's the essence of capitalism and globalization, that everything that is legitimate is massive. Yeah. But also, alternatively, what I've seen in Kenya is that they do actually use Pardner and Susu within banks. So banks have used it like I was speaking to this woman, I don't know how she explained it, but in some places on the continent, they've found ways of creating banking systems using like Partner and Susu, but also those banking systems are designed by like women, you know, who are like peasant farmers or like people who are actually like market traders. And I think like in terms of how we apply those things, obviously there's things to work out because no one solution works for everyone. But I really do believe it's something about how we facilitate trust with one another.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very good. There was a question on money and
just the gentleman at the back just sort of made the point about, yes, it is about money. And I just wanted to clarify what I was saying, that when I drew up the programme at The Guardian in terms of our own reparative justice work, we had a vague figure in mind, sort of thinking about what University of Glasgow had done at the time. But what was more important for me wasn't about coming up with a figure, it was about what we actually wanted to do. And so it was built from the bottom up. It was like, what do we actually want to do? We want to do a journalism project. We want to create new opportunities. We want to do new research work. We want to do work with descendant communities. And then after all that, I put a price on it. We priced every element of it. And the price came to roughly double what I had been expecting the price to come to and what we had in our heads. But when we put it to the board, we'd made the justification for it and the board approved it. And I guess that's the point I'm making, that I think if we'd just gone in and demanded a figure at the start, people would have just recalled, what are you going to do with all that money, all that cash, whatever. But I think making the point about what we would do, what do we actually want? Yeah. What do we want the new structure to be like? And work from there. And then we can make the case, which is a moral case, it's an indisputable case, it's inarguable. And then, actually, it will cost you this much money, but then, you've done all the work to persuade people that that's what they should give. So
thank you. Brilliant. Thank you. Sheeba, you wanted to come in on some of the reparations.
Yes, someone was saying about what action can be taken and about us being scattered and there not being a global getting together. First of all, I think globally we are more conscious now and we are getting together. It may not seem that way because everything is a bit all over the place, but it's literally all over the place in terms of one's more aware of the fact that they feel pain and there's something should be done regarding the repairing and the healing of this great atrocity that was inflicted on our race. So people are aware of that, people are doing things. It's about reinforcing and amalgamating oneself with organization. For instance, you've got Global African Congress that is actually facilitating this action. The action is to make people aware of the money that was borrowed to pay our enslavers and also to demand that the money be returned to us. Now, the Caribbean, Africa, Black countries, parts of Brazil, etc., we all know about the poverty levels. The education is being held down, which is making the poverty even more perpetual. For myself personally and other people I know, we go to Africa, we go to the Caribbean, and we help out financially because we want our people to prosper. This particular action is actually going to be leading a rally on the 31st of October at the Privy Council, and the numbers are needed. Ones need to come out and just be present. By being present, you're showing that you are working towards repatriation and reparation, because we're aiming to get things to how they were in the beginning. When we were at home living our lives, we were perfectly capable of governing ourselves and prospering. So it's about working towards getting to that place again. And this is one way of showing one's strength and one's commitment. There will be people in the audience giving these out. It's to be at the Privy Council on the 31st between 12 and 3 to show that you stand up for reparation. And reparation is very much about education. I think it's important that we focus on that element of things and that we work and help in the schools in Africa, in the Caribbean, and making sure that even the ones in the UK are being done the right way so that mindsets get educated, because that's the main thing. Mindsets are very set in the colonial ways, and some of them are not even aware of it.
Thank you. Do you want to just say again the march, what date it is?
It's the 31st of October at the Privy Council, which is One Horse Guards Road. And it's the nearest tube is Westminster, and it's between 12 and 3 p.m.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. Charmaine, do you want to come in? And then we'll come to Tatianna, and then we will sum up.
Okay, so just echoing what the sister said as well, education is key. And that's the ethos that I'm coming into doing the work with Church of England, is education. And also standing on the shoulders of elders that have come before and utilizing the knowledge that we know before. So, for example, what we've done is we've got 2 archivists that are working in, who's joined our team from the African community that are going to do cataloguing. Most of us ain't in these archives cataloguing and telling those stories. We've got 2 people, amazing people that are doing that. We've gone on a course with Decolonising the Archives to look at how we have a decolonized mindset into the approach of the work that we're doing. So it's not just educating the work, us individually, it's educating the people that we're speaking to. And it's not just Black people, it's educating everybody about this work. And that's where the transformation comes from. Like I was saying before I came here, I volunteer my time to go to Lewisham Young Leaders Academy to teach young people. And that is where the education comes. I'm not waiting for the school system to wake up. I teach young people outside the school system. Every Sunday, I'm teaching young people globally all around the world. I just came back from Brazil. I travel all the time. I'm going to the people and looking at the people doing the work. It's so important that we don't just look at a local focus, look at a global focus and educate ourselves. Even people in this room today, the ones that are not here, go out and tell your friends, family, enemies, everybody that's breathing, literally about this event. So it's even more busier next year, because even I was here last year, the numbers are increasing. We want to see that now. So we go to the O2. So it's even bigger to have more people having these conversations, or just not having the conversation, taking action on the conversations that we're having. That is very important, because we can come here and get vexed, shout and kiss teeth and all that kind of stuff. No, it's about what we're going to do when we leave this room today. Who are we going to speak to? That's where the reparation starts.
Thank you.
Then I'm going to continue to say,
let me just take a couple of contributions with the hats there. And then I'll come back. And then there was, then online. We've got one online? Yeah.
All right, I want to throw 2 questions on the 2 persons at the end because I didn't start from the beginning, so I catch you were with Church of England. Okay. So my question to you is, what is it Church of England is really doing? Because in 2016, I'm doing my own ancestral research and project, and I reached out to them, and in the interest of doing a collaborative work and share information, and I got a response back from them that they weren't really interested and had the time. And then fast forward years after, they decided to throw money at the situation. So I'm just interested in what they decided to do. Yeah. And to John at the end, this man asked a question about connections. One thing I do know for a fact, I know Charlie Gladstone is or was a part of the years of slavery, and we're familiar who Gladstone is. And I know he was doing work, in Guyana. So I'm wondering, what's he doing now with his family? Because they made a lot of noise and things they were doing, and everything went quiet. And I know you have connection in that field. So I'm asking, what is it he's doing now? And is Heroes of Slavery an organization, or just what it is really?
Okay, you might have to speak to them afterwards, to be honest, but thank you. I love a Jamaican accent. Oh my gosh. So very much. Sabby, do you know Jamaican? So it's now on Google Translator. Did you know that? Oh, gosh. we don't want them to know what it's saying. Sabby, you've got. Was there one more here? Yes. Okay.
Yes, my name's Maxine. I'm from University College Union. UCU. I'm also a teacher, a trade union activist. It's not so much a question, it's more of something that I think we need to consider if we haven't already considered it. when I looked at the TUC, the Trade Union Congress website to see what they were saying about reparations, I think the last post was 6 years ago. Yeah, a trade union that talks about equality and standards, etc. So my point is, I think if the TUC hasn't yet been approached about why they should be involved and what responsibilities they should have in this, they need to be, because it's wholly unacceptable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've got one more online, and then okay, very quick. If you can be very quick, waving your hand.
Hang on. Michelle Charters, head of International Slavery Museum in Liverpool. One of the things that I'd like to see, Dawn and Belle and the rest of the committee, is this conference in the key cities in this country. I would like to see it in Liverpool. And I would help to get it to Liverpool. I'd like to see it in Bristol. I'd like to see it in all the ports. So it's really important that we have to listen, we have to learn, and we have to act. And we've been doing that for decades. 4 decades of community activism has given me the skills to put into this International Slavery Museum that will have global connections, that will have global voices telling their own story, but more importantly, to break down the divides between the North and the South, or the UK and the rest of the world. We have to come together. We have to speak. We have to, be in spaces. We've travelled, myself, my colleague from the museum has travelled to be here today, like I travelled last year when I first got that position. But I'd like to see people come to Liverpool.
Thank you.
Because we've got so much to share.
Michelle, can you just say, you've just expanded the library, I think, the museum, right? Do you want to just say a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, and this is a perfect example. And Gus and Len Garrison and Bernie Grant, who asked me to be a facilitator on one of his leadership programs when he was taking it outside of London to connect the Black community. I come from Toxteth. I'm very proud of that. And I think what we've done is in 1994, we attended a temporary exhibition in the basement of our Maritime Museum. The late great Dorothy Kuya and Eric Scott Lynch and Dr. Ray Costello done a call to arms to the community to come and to see. And then from that day, from 1994 to 2007, the local Black community and National Museums Liverpool worked together to get more permanent space. So we went from the basement to the 3rd floor. What we've now got, or what we're going to have, is our own entrance in our own building with our expanded offer, not only of gallery spaces, but in the basement of our new building, which I'm not going to call basement, I'm going to call it the foundation, will be the International Slavery Museum Research Lab for curators, scholars, academics, and community members who've got none of them titles yet, but have got all of that lived experience to share. So we've got that in the foundation, and we have our learning and community space on the 2nd floor of that new museum, based on the work, the decades of work we've done, and making sure that schools in Liverpool understood the building they were going into, next to the 2 graving docks that still exist, that tells the story of how those slave ships that came into our docks was cleaned of their barnacles before they went back out to sea to Africa. We've got a story to tell. You've got a story to tell. What we need to do is come together.
Thank you.
And spread the word.
Thank you.
We're running over time, but I thought that was an important contribution, but they do phenomenal work in Liverpool. Thank you so much, Michelle and the team. Absolutely phenomenal. We have to finish now and everyone needs to go to the light. Thank you very much. I thought it was an informative session. Please connect with each other. This isn't something we're just talking about. We're going to see real action. Take care. God bless.